Hello, I'm Mr. Baker. This is the second lesson in my seventh chapter of environmental science. We're going to continue talking about land use, and today we're going to talk about some of the benefits of proper land management and some of the things that could go wrong or the consequences of not having proper land management. Right. So the first thing we need to talk about is that agricultural land is going to have, in general, a higher amount of organic matter that's going to supply a lot of the nutrients needed for growing crops. A high porosity means that it can store water well, that has a large volume of water it can store, and a high ish. I'm going to say ish there because you don't want it to be too high. Permeability, where water can easily flow into it and flow out of it. So that means the plants can also get that water back out of the ground easily, right? A lot of organisms living in the actual soil are going to continue changing that organic matter into chemicals that the plants can use and freeing up the nutrients from the molecules that they're part of, the macromolecules, those bigger ones that they're part of, and continuing things like the nitrogen cycle. Right? There will also be things like worms and larger vertebrate inside the ground that is actually tilling it up a little bit, not like a tractor tills it up, but turning it over and allowing the air to get inside it so that it's not just locked up. Right? We're also going to see a larger amount of topsoil with a healthy subsoil below it so that we have a gradient of soil textures as well as some space above the bedrock for water to actually be stored for those crops that are going to grow deeper and pull water from deeper in the ground, right? So agricultural land is that arable land that is specifically being used for growing crops, remember. Right. So if proper land management isn't being observed, we're going to see land loss. Mainly, it's going to be lost due to erosion. So that's the movement of soil away from the area it is. So it's being carried out due to either wind or water. All right. A lot of our agricultural methods are going to increase the risk of erosion, either because of the putting into the ground and pulling up from the ground of crops, or based on the way we plant, or if you're irrigating too much, you can actually see the salts that are inside the water being leached into the soil itself instead of being carried away into rivers and streams and watersheds, through watersheds rather. So we're going to see a salination of land. So it's going to lose the fertility over time as the salt in content increases, right? A big problem globally is desertification, which sounds like it's turned into a desert, but it's being turned into a desert, right? So the loss of soil nutrients and the ability to hold water. So the soil itself is no longer able to hold water like it used to be able to, and it doesn't have actual nutrients in it in the higher volumes that we would want in arable land, right? A lot of times this is due to excessive grazing. So the animals that are being pastured on the land are going to eat too much of the either crop that's there or natural grasses that are there. And because there's no longer roots in the soil to hold it in place, it is easily washed away or blown away. And so we're losing that top layer of soil, the topsoil, and we're moved into subsoil or worse, a sand or rocky mixture. Poor agricultural practices, like the poor irrigation, are also a part of this. Logging and clear cutting, removing trees and shrubs from the environment are going to do the same thing as excessive grazing, except for on a larger scale. The deeper, bigger roots of trees and shrubs are able to hold more soil in place per actual individual, so per plant, right? But the overall problem is that the soil is becoming not necessarily more sandy, but it's losing its ability to hold nutrients and water. On the opposite scale is waterlogging, which is either due to large scale flooding over a long period of time, or due to poor irrigation, or due to human human involvement in the environment where we are either building a dam or we're changing the flow of a river or changing the landscape in such a way that an area of it is becoming flooded. So when the water is underground, when the ground is underwater, flipped that around on accident, when the ground is underwater for a long enough period of time, it's going to lose the ability for crops to grow in it, right? It is important to note that some plants and some fields are waterlogged purposefully because it makes growing the crop easier. But if it's done for too long, we're going to see the nutrients being leached out of the soil into the water and then being carried away, or the amount of air that can get into the soil for the plants to use, or for the bacteria that live next to the plants, the mycorrhizae, to use in that turnover in the nitrogen cycle is going to go down. So we're going to have less nitrogen in the soil for plants to use, right? So it's the exact opposite of desertification, but it's the same outcome. Lower amount of nutrients in the soil that's useful for plants to grow. Now, this picture is of a fin, so you can see that there are still plants growing there, but it's not the plants that we're going to grow for food, all right? And this is out of Michigan. Right. Some good agricultural practices that can be used for farmland, for arable land, to sustain it and keep it arable for a longer period of time are, and you should probably know a few of these for my class if you're part of my class, are contour plowing, and that's the picture directly below my head, where you can see the plowing follows the natural curves of the earth. So you can see that it bends around the sides of hills, and this slows water flow down as it flows down a hill or into a ravine, and it allows less soil to be carried away and eroded. Right? In the same method, but on a larger scale, a steeper scale, is terracing, and that's the other picture here, where we've got layers of crops being grown at different elevations, and that slows water flow downhill. Right? It can also maximize land use on the side of a hill, right, to have these steps. There's also things like no-till farming, where they don't actually till the earth up. They push the actual seeds down into the ground with the remains of the last crop. And that's something that is being used here in Ohio a lot, along with contour plowing. Crop rotation is another big one for most of the U.S. Midwest, where we're switching between mainly soybeans and corn, and that's going to pull different nutrients from the ground at different rates over time, allowing those nutrients to be rejuvenated and replaced while it's in the off season for that crop. Right? The addition of compost and fertilizers to the land can act as a way to increase the organic content in the case of compost, or increase the nutrients available in the land in the case of fertilizers and compost. Right? Remember, fertilizers are chemicals. Compost is a natural product, mainly done by the breakdown of biological waste. So we've got ways to maintain and rejuvenate the nutrients in the ground, making sure that we're not allowing erosion to happen as much, mainly due to water flow. That's the one that we're mainly concerned with. Right? And one that I didn't list here, but I wanted to mention is avoiding overgrazing. So the rotation of the pasture animals, the herd animals that are on a pasture that are eating from it, rotating them through a few different pastures so that the land has time to go fallow and regrow back the grasses or the shrubs that the animals are eating before they're being pastured there again for the health of the land. Right. So the benefits are mainly just maintaining the environment that we as a human population rely on to grow our crops. Right. That's the benefit of proper land management. We talked a little bit about some of the risks and what happens when you don't have that proper land management, as well as a few methods for sustaining our land management. We're going to talk more about land use and the management of the land in my class this week, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper in a little bit different ways. So, as always, keep asking questions and keep learning. Have a good one.